Good afternoon. So I don't know if you all could see us dancing off stage, but we're very hyped. We're very excited to be here. So I hope you guys can match that energy, even on this rainy, slightly cold day. So I want to start out with the title of this session and what we talked about when we were coming up with it. So we're talking about civic engagement, but we were really talking about what does civic engagement look like in the future? What does civic engagement mean to people? I think in the past it's had a really kind of not inclusive definition. People think about it a lot and they think about voting really specifically, or lots of other things that many people in our communities cannot participate in or don't participate in for lots of different reasons. So I guess that's why we came up with civic imagination. You know, we're in our dream moment, right, for the afternoon, and what we're doing is we're dreaming a different future for ourselves. We're dreaming about what civic engagement that is inclusive, that actually moves the needle, that people want to participate in, that people feel visible in. What does that look like? So part of this is me vamping for time to give Melvin and Layla some time to think about this, because now I'm going to ask them what that looks like. What is it? And Layla, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here tonight. I'm so excited to be part of this conversation and to be alongside the mayor. And I love that intro, that people just automatically equate democracy and voting, or civic engagement and elections. And I think it's so much more than that, especially when you think about the history of this country, right? African Americans didn't get the right to vote until 1870, women 1920. A lot of young people today who are really civically engaged are under the age of 18 and can't vote. And so you have to disentangle what is it that they're doing if it's not voting. And you start to see a theme of leadership, right? How are they showing up in their community? How are they feeling a sense of responsibility to something that is bigger than themselves? You see these individuals asking, you know, what do I owe other people? What do they owe me? And am I willing to take a leap of faith that if I hold up my end of the bargain, they will too? And I think that gets us to the core of what I think civic engagement will and can look like in the future, an exciting definition where civic engagement is not who do we get elected, what are the policies we change, but that leap of faith, that idea of trust. When you define civic engagement as the activities that build trust in the places we live and work and play, I think that's a really fun and exciting and energizing way to build the communities that feel a sense of belonging, that feel a sense of leadership, and ultimately contribute to building a fabric that allows for democracy to exist.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well,
that's right. So before I ran for mayor, we spent about 2 years just in living rooms and coffee shops in our city. I always ask people kind of why are you planting your children in this community? Why are you building this business here? Like, why are you planting your career? Like, what are your dreams that you have in this city? We spent a lot of time then just bringing people together in a room. We'd have strangers walk into a room and we'd ask them all a question like, think of a happy childhood memory. And we made people like just do this like speed dating thing and tell each other their happy childhood memory and take one thing our happy childhood memory had in common. Oh, it involved adults who cared for us. Oh, it involved open space. Oh, it involved this and this and this. And we just put them on cards, and that's how we built the vision that we ended up running for when I ran for office, when I ran for mayor. I learned really two things from that process. One is that people, I think, I don't think we actually suffer from a lack of civic imagination very often. I can go to a high school, I can go to a barber shop, I can go to a backyard cookout and hear an enormous volume of civic imagination. Oftentimes, the dreams that we dare to plant in communities are just a staggering mismatch with the dreams that we dare to strive for in halls of government. So I think that's one. I frankly think that the only place that we kind of sometimes do lack in a civic imagination is in the halls of government. That's ironic. The other thing that I think we learned is that I don't think people are in a space right now where they hope somebody behind the curtain is doing good things on their behalf. Mm-hmm. I think people want to have their fingerprints on something. And so that's how we've sort of built our administration. You know, we've raised the minimum wage, we've put money into affordable housing, we've completely rethought our infrastructure around public safety. We're at the kind of forefront of this national guaranteed income movement. Check out the movie called It's Basic. It premiered at Tribeca last month. And our signature kind of promise is this initiative called College Bound St. Paul. It starts every child born in our city with $50 in a college savings account. I love it. Thank you. I learned a lot about that from you. But I love to tell mothers in our community, if you don't want your child to have a college savings account, there's paperwork to fill out, because we really mean every child. But people always, whenever we do something new, people always ask, how'd you think of that? And it's always funny to me, because the truth is, I didn't. Like, we're constantly trying to figure out, how do we find new ways to tune in? How do we find new ways to listen to people, whether that's our frontline staff or whether that's the community that we serve? And there are no shortage of ideas from folks on how the city government can be more relevant in their lives. As we talk about democracy, we spend a lot of time, the way I think about it, talking about making democracy function, which is the election laws and things like that. I don't think we spend nearly enough time talking about how to make democracy work, which means making this system actually make people's lives a little bit better and make it easier to feed their children.
Yeah. We're going to come back to that.
That's right.
Layla, when we talk about the ways that we envision civic engagement, when we think about the future, the democracy that we want, what are the things that we want to count? What are the things that we want to bolster in our communities for people to be able to do, to have those footprints, to have those fingerprints, not footprints, we're not using our feet, to have those fingerprints on all of the work that is being done that should be coming back to them and making their lives better?
Is this one for me?
Yeah, that one's for you.
Well, so what I was going to say, actually, just on that point of making democracy deliver, I think we feel like it's not possible because there's so many barriers. There's so many sort of structural things that are holding us back from actually getting the change that we wish that we could see. And that's not true. There are people like you. There are people like the 1,600 young elected officials who have been part of my programming at Millennial Action Project, who are doing innovative work, who are listening to their constituents, who are asking them, what do you need, and how can I find a way to work within the system as it exists to build towards that vision, to deliver it today, to actually get some cool stuff done in service of our communities, our families. And I think for me, that question about what is it that we want, I think people want to see something hopeful, right? They want to see a path forward out of a feeling of exhaustion, that we're not dreaming, we're just like reacting, we're just sort of treading water. And what gives me a lot of hope is the fact that over the past 2 years, compared to 2020 to 2022, we've seen a 170% increase in Gen Zers at the state level in elected office. 170% increase. A third of members of Congress who are millennials so we've increased by a third the number of millennials in Congress. And I think that question of, wow, our democracy kind of looks like really uninspired and like on fire, and yet a generation of leaders are running towards that. They feel a sense of agency. They don't think there's somebody behind the curtain who's pulling the strings for them. They're actually saying, you know what, I have some pretty good ideas, and if not me, then who? Let me run. And we're seeing this growth of young people step into office. The other thing that I'll note, just from a hope standpoint, is what does it matter that young people are running if they're not actually sort of getting things done, right?
That's right.
So let's look at the numbers. We're about 1/5 of elected officials are young, so like 45 years and under, which I think maybe, is generous. Yeah.
Come on, high five.
Yeah, we got you. So
Back
one
in the
in
game.
5, we're underrepresented. 1 in 3 pieces of bipartisan legislation at the state level is authored by a young person. And so we've got these two things. We've got young, creative people running towards our institutions, towards our democracy with great ideas. Yeah. Then we've got these effective instincts. They're actually getting things done. I'm not just saying that. Look at the numbers. And that should give us a lot of inspiration, a lot of hope, a lot of permission to dream about the things that we want, because we're sending in fresh legs every day, and they just need us to know that we're looking and that we've got their back and we celebrate them.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Melvin, what gives you hope?
The people I talk to every day. literally the people I talk to every day, and when I engage them, you know, my wife and I joke that, like, particularly during the pandemic, we got like interpersonal interactions like taken from us. And if you just sit on Twitter, you'll be convinced that any city on the planet is just going to hell in a handbag, right? And then you like go out in the real world and talk to people at a coffee shop and realize, hey, some cool things are really happening here still. And so I get a lot of hope from the people who I engage every single day. I get a lot of hope from the people who are willing to put their trust in city government, willing to put their trust in their mayor. And to the point that you're just making, I think that's a really incredible point and a really important point that you're making, because it shifts maybe the topic of this discussion from civic imagination to like an old model of like leadership fragility that we have to move away from, right? Like, we've seen this model of leadership that the leader has to be the smartest person and the be-all, end-all for everybody, and has to have the best ideas and have to be the most creative. And you know, the millennials created the concept of crowdsourcing, right? One of my mentors when I got elected told me, hey, listen, I got two things to tell you. There's bad news and good news. I said, give me the bad news first. He says, listen, there is not one person in this city of 300,000 people who knows everything that you need to know to run this city. I was like, okay, well, what's the good news? So there's 300,000 people in this city who know everything you need to know to run this city. And that's an important way of, I think, looking at it. But a lot of times when we do things like we do, every member of my cabinet, we've hired through what we call our community hiring panels. And when we first launched that, like, people were all over Twitter saying, that's not leadership, you have to make the decision, right? Which is just not my definition of leadership. But it's the opposite of what we're kind of used to. And that, I think, getting away from that fragile model toward those younger folks who are willing to ask each other, who are willing to have their minds change, who are willing to be wrong and learn something tomorrow that they didn't know yesterday, is really important.
Right. You know, I think one of the things that happens, one of the things that we hear a lot when we talk to people from our newsroom, and we say, you know, why aren't you out there voting? Why aren't you out there engaging in your community? Why aren't you out there doing all these things? And a lot of them have mis and disinformation about how their ideas can actually become policy. They have mis and disinformation about how successful young people in politics are being, and that they're actually getting the needle moved.
Right.
So, you know, as journalists, that's something that we're trying to combat. You know, I think also I'm in DC. I know some of you are too. You know, the messaging in DC is, you know, bipartisanship is dead, nothing ever gets done because no one can agree, blah, 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 which has been the messaging for, I don't know, you know, when was Obama's first term, second term? It's been going on forever. And I think that is one of the things that we hear a ton about, why people are kind of trying to push aside and not necessarily engage in a way that we would want them to. So I'm wondering, you know, I both feel exhausted by this question, but also get it all the time, so I'm putting it to y'all. How do y'all think about talking to people about building bridges to get things done in this era where sometimes, you know, the other side is not a side that is rational, is not a side that is necessarily doing anything that we would want to do, but like, how do you have that conversation about what building bridges looks like?
Listen, you know, Anne said earlier in her opening remarks, she used the term radical collaboration, and I love that. I love that. We should talk about co-creating solutions in a way that's exciting and that gets people energized. I think the word bipartisan actually has a lot of baggage attached to it, and people don't necessarily see that as desirable. They see it as maybe watered down or not getting the full sort of creativity that's possible when two people with different sets of information come together to share that and co-create and build something beautiful and new and innovative. And I think it's really hard to explain that actually to people. I think you have to show it. You know, I kind of alluded to this earlier. I run an organization called Millennial Action Project. We're the largest cross-partisan network of young elected officials in this country. And in 2013, we had a super simple organizing strategy, which is, what if as all these young people are stepping into elected office, we help them connect and build relationships, not along partisan lines, but along a generational identity. And that simple question helped us launch something called the Future Caucus, which is for anyone under the age of 45, Democrats, Republicans, and it helped them, like a lot of us, feel like they had peers in this job that, from everything they'd seen, you know, in the news or, you know, on the campaign trail, felt like was going to be a really toxic work environment. They were going to be, you know, unable to get a lot of things done, and to have sort of a network of peers is incredibly energizing. It creates a permission structure to believe, to imagine, to see other people as complicated, and in those complications, discover opportunities to actually get something done, right? It comes back to this word of trust. It helps build trust. And then it starts opening up your imagination. What can we work on? Maybe if we disagree on 70% of things, there's a 30% bucket where we can get started. And then you start showing people, like, what's happening in that 30%? What are the things that you can go back to your communities and say, look what we got done for you. Look at the maternal health bill that we were able to pass in a bipartisan way. Look at the bail reform we were able to pass in a bipartisan way. In Arkansas, our Future Caucus in Arkansas, just a couple weeks ago, had a press conference where they announced 39 bills that they passed together in a bipartisan way just last year. And I think you start to beat the drum of, this isn't just an idea, this isn't just an imagination, this is happening now. And the fact that it is something that people can see helps them believe that it is possible to grow and to be real. I think the last thing I'll say is, we kind of have to think about it like a gym. Like, you can think about like the Future Caucus or these spaces where we're bringing people together, we're building bridges, as like a democracy gym where you're building the muscle memory and you're getting stronger and you're getting good at doing things that feel really hard right now. And I think, again, the more that you can show people that it's possible, it's like talk is cheap, but when you put those people up, you have them talk about the things that they've gotten done, the people who they've impacted, the lives that they've changed. I think it starts to re-inspire people and give them a path to, to imagine again.
Yeah, sure. I think as a simple statement, if you want a cycle to break, you have to break a cycle, right? So when we do events, every time we do an event, whatever it is, we sort of think of it in 3 phases. We want people to hear from me, we want me to hear from people, we want people to hear from each other. And I always tell people, like, the rent that you pay for the mayor to listen to you is the willingness to listen to the people at your table. Same as I'll be smarter if I hear from you, and we all agree on that. You'll be smarter if you listen to each other. But I used to think we had to like sit people at the table and like force them to listen to one another. But one of the things that I think I've learned is that there's a relatively like minuscule percentage of the American population who's actually dug in on the sides that we see every time we turn on the news or every time we look at Twitter or Threads or whatever it is. And most people actually want to engage. A couple of years ago, the former president came to Minnesota, and there was this big kind of protest movement outside of and rally outside of this place where he was doing the speech. And we just felt like the problem isn't that people aren't yelling it loud enough. And so we decided to skip this protest rally, and instead the night before this speech, I just tweeted, here's where I'll be having lunch tomorrow. If you agree with my politics, come have lunch with me. If you disagree with my politics, come have lunch with me. What we didn't know at the time was that the restaurant we chose, like, it could not have been a worse obstacle course to get to the restaurant we chose. It's raining that day. The restaurant we chose is in like a 1-block radius of street construction, and like 100 people walked in the room to have lunch with us, right? And it was really amazing. Some of the people who walked in to say, I love what you're doing, but it's even more amazing to see people who walked in the room and said, I don't agree with you on anything, but like, this is really cool to be able to kind of engage with people. So I believe people actually want that. So my challenge to all of you guys is, the next time you're in a conflict, or next time you find somebody who fully expects you not to listen to them, shock them and surprise them by actually listening to them as another human being, not as somebody who's like ideas and humanity you have to kind of, shove it back in their face, but shock them and surprise them by going first and being the one to listen to them in the way that you wish they would listen to you, and see what happens. And if we all do that, I think we could do something cool.
Definitely.
What percentage of the time do you feel like that has turned out poorly, or in a way that you felt like you could not manage or was not generative?
It's both. But at some point, like, when you do that, the person is either going to be committed to like conflict, and eventually they'll just get tired and leave you and they'll walk away, or you'll find a point where it kind of moves forward. Our mantra in our office, people come to our office like angry or upset or mad or happy or glad. It's all the same thing. And I tell my staff all the time, what they're telling us is that our work matters intensely to them, and there's no greater gift that they can give us. And so when we approach people who are angry and say, hey, it means a lot to me, it helps me do my job when you come and tell me how you feel about that, it doesn't necessarily mean I'll agree with you, but it informs the way I approach the work work that I do. Like I said, sometimes people just walk away and it doesn't necessarily change anything. It gives me peace that I don't have to kind of ride the roller coaster with them. But sometimes we have these like incredible moments where we're able to form allies and we're able to form partnerships and able to have somebody else walk out thinking, like, we actually made a connection.
Mm-hmm. I think people want to feel seen. People want to feel heard. And when you can give that to people, that lowers their defenses in ways that are transformative for the amount of change that you can make. I think that spirit of curiosity is probably one of the biggest tools in our toolbox to actually open people's hearts and minds to what could be possible.
That's right.
I mean, I think that's exactly right. You know, one of the first things that you learn as a journalist is that when somebody sends you an email that is really ugly, and I've gotten some ugly emails in my day, sometimes you just respond to them and you say, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way, or, oh, did you read the article? Did you read this part? And the way that they come back around like a full human being is unreal. And I think it's because people think that names that they see in the news, people they see on a podium, whatever it might be, they don't think of you as a real person. They don't think you will engage with them as a real person and that you will hear them, that you will see them. And when you do that, in my experience, 9 times out of 10, their attitude shifts.
That's right.
And that one time, like you said, just, you know, you kind of create your distance. Melvin gave the audience a challenge. Layla, I want to know what your challenge would be to the audience.
You know, I love that idea of like, what if we just imagined that other people were also humans?
Yeah.
And I think it sounds like so basic, but like, what if?
Yeah.
So what if everybody here, just somebody who was just completely in your mind, evil, awful, dumb, whatever, like what if you just imagined that they were like a mom or a dad or a son or, you know, like just had a bad day, whatever. So sort of like complicate them somehow in your mind. The second thing, the challenge that I would give to everyone here is 13% of all young elected officials are a part of a bipartisan group called the Millennial Action Project. They want to work together. They want to solve problems. They want to hear from you. And so my challenge is let me know how we can show up for you, how we can come to your aid, and imagine what we can get done if we work together.
Well, I think we could have this conversation all day. I'm so honored to be on the stage with y'all.
Likewise.
And thank you so much for listening.
Likewise. Thank you. Well done.